Thanks for listening to this episode of The Narrative. Before we get started, if you've got a question or a comment for a future episode that you'd like us to address, feel free to give us a call or text us at 614-769-7077. Again, that number is 614-769-7077. Or you can send us an email, thenarrative@ccv.org.
This is America's most neglected major problem. It affects families. It affects businesses. If you're a small business that relies on discretionary income, like you're paying the price for all this. Like all this money that people are losing, that's money they're not spending at your business. This needs to be on your agenda if you're somebody who wants to make a difference in America.
Welcome back to The Narrative. I'm Center for Christian Virtue Communications Director Mike Andrews, here with my co-host, CCV President Aaron Baer, and our Policy Director David Mahan, unpacking the news of the day. And we're right at the start of 2023, just a couple of weeks into it. And fellas, one thing that we suspected would be on the horizon, we found out last week, is in fact happening, and that's an abortion battle coming up on the Ohio ballot, most likely in November. Aaron, can you kind of take our listeners through some of that?
Yeah.
At least what we know right now.
No, for sure. You know, I think really the big picture on this is since the Dobbs decision back in June that overturned Roe v. Wade, there has been a really well-funded effort by the pro-abortion community to create a right to abortion in states all over the nation. And the blunt reality of it is pro-lifers have lost in every single one of these states. 6 states have had this issue brought up since June, and pro-lifers are 0 for 6 right now. And so we knew that sort of Planned Parenthood and the ACLU and a number of these pro-abortion groups were kind of sniffing around thinking about coming to Ohio with this. We figured we'd be dealing with this at some point. And they have made their intentions clear that on November 7th of 2023 in Ohio, there will be a constitutional amendment to create a right to abortion in Ohio that Ohio voters will be voting on. And we might be the only state going in 2023. They're saying they're going to look at a number of other states in 2024. But it's certain they're now going forward in 2023 in Ohio. And we haven't seen the actual language yet. That language won't come out until about mid-February, end of February, according to their press releases, the pro-abortion group's press releases. But we fully expect this to be a ballot initiative to create a right to abortion up until birth, and be one of the most extreme abortion policies. I mean, they're going to try to make Ohio, California, and put it into our state constitution, which all but locks it in for the next generation. I mean, for the foreseeable future. So this is literally a fight for lives right now.
Yeah, I think this is one area that's going to take the body of Christ to stand firm. Pastors are going to have to it's an education thing. When you look at the 6 states that where we lost, it was a lack of education. They could play with the messaging, on the ballot, and folks just didn't know enough to come out and fight against it. So I think the awareness campaign that happens, again, we may not be able to beat them with money, but we can beat them with people.
Yeah, and Dave, I think that's such a big part of this. And I want to just take a minute to talk about this point here on the messaging side, because this is something that there's been a few things that since this has all happened that have kind of set me off. Go figure. This happens from time to time. That I got upset about, right? Like we know we're gonna get outspent, right? We know we can't go toe to toe with them on dollars, right? But that, quite frankly, this is what CCV does every day, right? We know we can't beat the teachers unions fighting their game, right? But we know that doesn't mean we lose, right? Take Michigan for example. Pro-lifers got outspent 3-1, but at the same time,
60 million.
Yeah, they got the left had 60 million. Yeah, but pro-lifers raised about 23 million there, right? It wasn't an underfunded campaign. We expect to be able to raise serious money. We're going to need everybody and all the help we can get on that. But I think a lot of times, and I'm not gonna name names, and I'm not gonna specifically call out groups, but I remember seeing after the Kansas loss and after Kentucky and Michigan, I heard a lot of excuse making on the pro-life side. And some things along the lines of, well, the left just lies so much. Their ads were lying so much, and they were just so they were saying things about the initiative that just weren't true. And it's like, yeah, guys, they're baby killers. Like, of course they're gonna lie. We're going after their cash cow here,
Right?
and they're true believers in this stuff. And they're gonna throw everything they have at it. And so, I think for the pro-life community, as we're thinking about this fight coming to Ohio, one, just lose all thoughts on that on the left and the pro-abortion groups running a campaign with integrity and dignity, right?
Yeah. We need a strong message. We need a strong base. We need to get out early, right? There were some of these states were just way too late.
Yep. We can't wait. We got to start talking to pastors now, right? Yeah. And the other thing about this too that really jumped out to me on this is, me saying I'm concerned about this initiative. I think we can and will win, right? I do. I think it's going to be maybe the most difficult ballot fight we've ever had in Ohio. And I'm counting things like the marriage amendment and other things like that on this. But I think we can and will win. But one of the big things that I keep coming back to, and a few folks, a few of my good followers on Twitter that love to come at me all the time, they'll say, "Oh, Aaron's saying he's concerned about this. I thought Aaron always talks about how Ohio is a pro-life state." And I have no doubt that Ohio is a pro-life state. But what we need to understand on this initiative is that when people are going to vote on this, they're not voting on what they think about abortion, right? They're voting on, do they think they can tell somebody else what to do?
Mm-hmm.
The reality of abortion has been sort of covered up by slick messaging, even by the word abortion itself, right? It kind of covers up that actually the life of a child is being taken in a most gruesome way possible. Sometimes by being torn limb from limb, sometimes by having an acid injected into them, sometimes by having labor induced, and the child just being expelled from the mother's womb alive and into a toilet, right? So the reality of what abortion is kind of covered up. And so ultimately what the debate comes down to is, and this is, I know, Dave, your wife sees this every day in the pregnancy center, is, does this voter think that they can tell a low-income woman in a very difficult situation what to do, right? And that tough situation, that message is actually what we're having to put in context, right? And help folks understand that, one, not only are you ending up taking a life here, but you're actually not even helping that woman.
Yeah.
That's a really hard message to put into a 30-second TV ad, right? This conveys the difficulty of what we're talking about, and it also conveys how we have to be so much smarter in how we're marketing this, right, Dave?
Yeah, the abortion is what? The who is what's most important. What are we aborting? Right? There would be no abortion without what it does, and it's in a human life. And I think that the more we can paint that picture of the who that's being affected, the more we win.
Right.
The more we get into, the libertarian type, style of, taking away choices. As a society, there's certain things that we just cannot condone, and murder being one of them.
Right.
Right. And so we just need to stick to the humanity of the child. And really, we just need not to be lazy. Get up, talk to somebody, get out and vote, take somebody with you, support the initiative that's going on to defeat this, what I would think is demonic attack against the image of God.
Right. No, and I think too, Dave, the other aspect of this is we have to be willing to look at the abortion issue from a wide variety of viewpoints in how we message this, right? So, for example, abortion is murder, right? But there's so many other aspects of this industry that I think for folks would help inform their vote, right? Mm-hmm. So you might not actually think abortion is all that bad, right? You might not be convinced that life begins inside the womb. But do you think human trafficking is wrong? And do you think that it's wrong that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is often used by traffickers to conceal what's happened to the women they pimp and prostitute, to conceal rape, to conceal child rape and things like that, right? We have such unbelievable stories. Do you think it's wrong to sell body parts, right? And things like that. There's aspects of this issue that I think, and I will say, this is already, Dave, you were out in Washington last week. because I can't stand being out there anymore. It's your turn to
From one swamp to another.
to breathe that polluted air. But talking with firms about this, you know, a lot of our pro-life friends are working with us on this, on how we attack it. And I think one of the things we're really committed to at CCV is when we're mounting this effort, we're going to be smart about how we do our campaign. We're going to be we're not going to get locked down in the messages that make us feel good. We're going to get focused on the messages that win. And to Dave's point, first and foremost, we have to awaken the church to get involved in this.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's some aspect to this too. We don't want to get into a battle of words,
right,
with an organization that's calling themselves Ohioans for Reproductive Freedom.
Right.
When reproduction has already occurred.
Exactly, right.
It's not the freedom that's on the line here that they think it is. So to just have these discussions and try and get down to that level, that's not how we win. We win by telling the better story and bringing these things out into the open so that the average voter knows what they're voting for.
Oh, yeah. Which, you know, Mike, you just tapped on one of my favorite just general political rules, which is whatever the left says they're advocating for, they're actually advocating for the other thing, right? So, you know, reproductive freedom. Nobody's trying to stop anybody from reproducing. The only people that are actually trying to stop reproduction are the people that are pro-abortion. They're trying to cut off the process of reproduction. It's insane.
You brought up just a piece about telling a story. I travel, used to more before I got to CCV and destroyed my life. But I used to travel a lot with survivors of human trafficking and very progressive audiences, social work, law enforcement, education. And it's always amazing. The last day of the seminar, you would have 5 or 6 survivors up there, and almost like to an event, you would have somebody ask the question about, did you ever conceive? You know, when you were being trafficked, when you were a victim, did you ever conceive? What happened with that? And it shocks me every time that the room is dropped down quiet when these women talk about how they were forced to have abortions. They were forced to abort babies that they wanted. Yep. Right. And the effect that has on them 20, 30 years, some of them 40 years later. I don't know if someone in that audience had ever heard that story before about the humanity of the woman, right, and the humanity of her child and being forced to do something as heinous as that and the effect that it have on her years later. You know, think back on all of the human trafficking stories you've heard. It's very, you know, right and left. People are talking about human trafficking quite a bit. And think about how many times you've heard that angle. Most people don't want to hear that. And I think it's up for us in the body that know better to teach better so that we can do better.
Amen. Well, another big issue that's coming up in 2023 for us, of course, is the backpack bill. And if we ever needed an argument for school choice, we saw something come through today that we wanted to share with our listeners, and just take a listen to some of this video that we received from Accuracy in Media. It's a website that did some undercover work in Ohio, talking to some DEI specialists in the greater Columbus area about their policies, particularly surrounding critical race theory in classrooms.
And before we play this, guys, regardless of how you feel about DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Or diversity, inclusion, and equity, as I like to say, DIE. Anyway, sorry.
Critical race theory, CRT. Listen, there's terrible messaging on both sides of that argument. Really, what we're about to let you listen to is not about DEI or DIE or CRT. It's about parents being the viewpoint of public educators on parents being barriers to service. That's what we're talking about here. Go ahead and play.
All I can think of when I think of that House bill is my Southern parents always raising us on these little funky phrases that I never understood. And one of them was, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So whether you can pass a bill that you can't teach CRT in a classroom, but if you didn't cover programming, or you didn't cover extracurricular activities or something like that, that message might still get out. Oops.
Right. Oh gosh, I love that.
Oops.
Yeah.
There will be a way. we kept getting these emails, do you have critical race theory in your curriculum, which was what the talking point was from a certain news channel. So we got to the point where first we're going to ask you, what do you mean by critical race
Do
theory?
you think we're teaching higher education, grad school stuff to your second grader?
And then the second thing is, no, we don't have that in our curriculum. You didn't ask about the conversations in the hallway. You didn't ask about, which we don't have those anyway. But the point is, we're going to answer your question. Nowhere in our curriculum does critical race theory exist. And it went away.
We don't have
Well, I
to,
kind of want to know that y'all are having some conversation around.
like the tenets of it, like diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice.
Those conversations are happening. Absolutely.
Right on.
But, you know, and when
Okay.
people ask us a question, we answer their question. But yes, we absolutely have those conversations going on.
Pretty clear evidence that this is in the school system, even if it's not the curriculum, it's being admitted by higher ups in the school district that this is in the schools. David, just help us unpack this.
This man has amen everything I've been saying for 20 years of sitting in classrooms all across the country. He just verbalized what I've been trying to convince teachers, principals, and parents that is going on. I don't know if we played this part in the cut, but this director of DEI said, you know, oops, like if we omitted something, if it's not in the curriculum, but oops, you know, if it comes out in instructional materials, if it comes out in another way, then oops. He made a quote that said, 5 years, they look back and say, after 5 years, they look back and say, what the heck happened? Family, I want you to think about how many times you've said that. How many times you've seen something crazy in the media about what kids are doing, whether it's about sexuality, whether it's about gender, transgender ideology,
Drugs, vaping,
anything. And then how many times you've looked across the dinner table at your spouse or whoever, your grandparents, your mother, father, and said, what is going on? How do we get here? He just told you, when you send your children to Pharaoh, right? Don't wonder why they come out the way that they are. We've sent them to Pharaoh for generations to be indoctrinated, educated, and then they come out, and then 4 to 5 years later, we wonder what the heck is going on. Oops.
Yeah, no, Vince, look, we should just play that clip for them, that second part. Here, let's play that.
You can pass a bill that you can't teach CRT in a classroom, but if you didn't cover programming, or you didn't cover extracurricular activities or something like that, that message might still get out. Oops.
Right. Oh gosh, I love that.
Oops.
It's right there.
Right.
And this is why the backpack bill, school choice, is so important to give parents an option to get their kids away out of this environment.
Well, and that's to me, there's so many things to unpack here. First and foremost, it's actually why, you know, CCV, we have supported a lot of these bills to sort of change curriculum in Ohio schools. Things like the CRT ban, things like curriculum transparency. Like these are all good concepts, right? We think they are worthwhile endeavors. At the same time,
Not deep enough.
we have to acknowledge their limitations, right? This guy just highlighted everything, like proved everything we have been saying, that the only way you actually stop this is by making parents the accountability mechanism. Because again, we have 611 or so public school districts in the state. You know, that's tens of thousands of actual school buildings, right? And there is no way we could have a bureaucracy big enough to actually enforce any of these laws. The only people that can actually enforce anything against these schools are the individual parents. And the only way the parents can actually enforce anything is if they can take their kids out and the taxpayer dollars follow. That's why it's not enough to have a voucher program that is only for low income kids. It's not enough to have a voucher program that's just for kids in failing academic schools. It's this kind of garbage, because the reason why this guy is laughing is because he knows no matter what a parent does, he's still getting his taxpayer dollars. They're still getting their hundreds of millions of dollars, right? They don't have to care. They don't care what any parent says. They're able to laugh them off. And so there's that aspect of it. The second aspect I do want to just pound on with him is, again, this is for as transparent as this guy was, they are teaching critical race theory in public schools, in Upper Arlington, in every public school in the state of Ohio and really in every public school in America. Because, again, what he is categorizing here is, are they teaching in the class, boys and girls, this is what critical race theory is, right? And he is being honest. The one thing he is being honest about here is, yes, they correct. They are not doing that. They're not going to second graders. They're not even going to high school students, most likely, and saying, here's what critical race theory is. Here is who Kimberly Crenshaw is. Here who is Herman Marcuse. No, that's right. They're not doing that. That's not what we're accusing them of. And that's not even a proper understanding of what critical theory broadly or critical race theory specifically is. Critical race theory, it's a worldview. It's a way of understanding the world around us, right? It's a way of interpreting facts in history and building a grand narrative about what is just and what is unjust, right? This is a Marxist worldview that tries to explain the world, explain things through a power dynamic. And that is the worldview that every major university is teaching teachers to explain the world, teaching teachers to explain history, teaching teachers to explain society and justice and what's right and wrong. And that is absolutely being taught and used in every class. It's the lens that they explain the world, right? There's not a Christian worldview and then this secular worldview that is completely non-biased towards anything. Nobody's omniscient, right? I know we're going down a worldview discussion here and we're doing news, but this is so important for. There's not like this Christian worldview and then an Islamic worldview and a Jewish worldview and a Hindu worldview, but then there's the secular worldview that is nonpartisan and non-biased and it perfectly. No, that doesn't. Every worldview has a perspective it's coming from. We would say the Christian worldview is the only true one. It has an explanation for all of life and humanity and righteousness and evil. They're doing the same thing with their religious worldview through critical theory, and that's the lens that's being taught in schools right now.
And an important distinction here, too, I think it's not that there are discussions about race that are taking place. Those are necessary and important discussions.
Yes.
Right.
It is the means by which they are having those conversations to create this division and separation.
Because
between...
there are important conversations that need to be had about race, and CRT is not that.
Exactly.
But this man here, what he just illustrated for everyone listening is that what parents want doesn't matter.
No.
You know, we're going to lie and trick you. The first young lady said, we're going to trick parents. That's what you need to catch. You know, these are publicly funded schools. I want to know on paper at the beginning of the year, everything you intend to impart into my child, the child that my wife bore, right? That I feed, that I pay for, air conditioning, heat, car. Listen, that's my baby. That's my child. It is on me to raise that child in the fear and admonition of the Lord and teach him how to walk, teach him how to eat. And if I put that child in that school, then you have a responsibility to me. I am not a barrier to service, right? You work for me, right? So that is what this man just illustrated, you know, in a nutshell, is that you don't matter, parents. I'm going to do whatever the heck I want to do.
And let me put a really fine point on this to what Dave just said. If you are a Christian, if you are a conservative, and you say you care about reforming the public schools and how broken the public schools are and everything going on there, and you are not advocating for the backpack bill, and that is not your top priority, these people like this, these public school administrators are laughing at you. They know they don't have to take you seriously. They know that you are a joke because everything that you're doing, they're able to get around. Because what makes them invincible is the fact that they have a guaranteed income stream from taxpayers that nothing will take away from them. And that's why they freak out so much about the backpack bill, because that gets at the thing that is their biggest protection.
Well, one of these weeks, fellas, we're going to find a topic that you're passionate about so we can really bring some fire to this program. We're going to keep working out there, listeners.
Tired of it, Mike. They keep doing it, man.
Well, hey, I want you all to stick around. Coming up after a quick break, we've got a great conversation coming up with Les Bernal from Stop Predatory Gambling. We will be right back on The Narrative. Hey, Narrative listeners. You know, Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian Chamber of Commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org. Welcome back to The Narrative. Thanks for sticking around. We're so excited now to be joined by Les Bernal. And Les is the National Director of Stop Predatory Gambling, a national advocacy network working to reveal the truth behind commercialized gambling operators to prevent more victims. Les, thank you so much for the time today to talk with us about, I think, somewhat of an under-the-radar topic for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, we consider the problem of predatory gambling America's most neglected major problem. You know, what you're seeing in Ohio is what we're seeing across the country, and that is commercialized gambling is now the public voice of American government today. It's what we advertise and market to the American people more than anything else, and it's a major reason that we have so much family dysfunction in our country, so much wealth inequality, so much poverty, and frankly, why in many ways why government is broken, regardless of where your political stripes stand. It's been an epic policy failure, and it's time to reform it.
And one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you now, Les, is because sports gambling just became legal in Ohio as of January 1st, and it's everywhere. We can't even drive to work down our street without seeing a big billboard about Ohio can finally bet on the home teams. I can't log on to Twitter without seeing about 6 different ads for different gambling networks in my feed. This is something that's not only there to be available for people, but it's seeking out people to try and get them hooked and get them into the system, if you will.
Yeah, it's important to a couple of notes. It's important for your listeners to understand that there was no grassroots movement in Ohio for commercialized sports gambling. This was driven by very powerful financial interests in concert with some media companies, billionaire professional sports team owners, as well as some, I would say, politicians from both political parties, driven by a lust for power. And so now what they're doing with online sports gambling is, you guys, we're all grown-ups here, right? I mean, so and you're seeing all this advertising. Imagine what it's like if you're like a 16-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid who loves sports, loves your Ohio sports teams. And now, to be a sports fan, it's not enough just to watch the drama of the sports or the competition. How this marketing occurs is they frame it as you're not a sports fan anymore unless you're betting on these games. And so it's normalizing gambling for kids in Ohio and across our country. And so the reality is what the state is doing is they're unleashing an epidemic of child gambling across the state. And the only people who are going to benefit from this epidemic of child gambling are the people that run the gambling games. All the citizens in Ohio, regardless of whether you ever gamble, whether you ever place a wager or not, you're going to pay for this tragedy, both from a family standpoint, from a standard of living standpoint, and from a financial standpoint, because we all suffer a lower standard of living when there's so much money being lost on commercialized gambling. The economic impact of all this commercialized gambling that you have in Ohio is the economic impact is it's like whipping out $100 bill, throwing it into the street, and then paying somebody a minimum wage to pick it up. It's a sterile transfer of wealth. And so we all suffer for that.
Yeah. Les, I want to drill in on that just a little bit more here, because I think it's one of those, I remember testifying against this a few years ago, and we held this off. I like to keep saying we held it off as long as we can and as long as we could here. And eventually they have endless money and resources, right? It's big ROI for them on spend a lot of it on lobbyists, but on the other side you get a huge payout. One of the things that we talk a lot about here at CCV is cultural transformation, right? We want to change culture in a lot of different ways. There's the sad reality is I think there's very few things that actually do change culture, right? Technology changes culture, right? I think it's the reason why we're focusing so much on the backpack bill, right? Changing the way we fund education. That'll change culture in times. Commercialized gambling is, as you call it, rightfully so. Commercialized gambling changes culture. It changes the way we look at sports. Can you dive in a little bit more about how this warps the way we understand sports, and the next generation especially will look at sports?
Because now, I played sports my whole life. I was a men's high school and college basketball coach for many years. Like, I love sports as much as anyone you're going to see. And so I was driven by the competition. I love the drama of sports, the camaraderie of it all. But now, the sporting experience, when you're watching an event, that what they're doing with this, it's not just betting on, will the Bengals cover the spread against the Ravens, when they play in their game. It's I'm going to bet on every single play of the game. Is this next play going to be a run or a pass? So in a gambling way, what they're doing is making the experience of watching sports like playing a slot machine. So it becomes what you're being driven by. The value here, the villain in this is greed. It's greed by the gambling operators. It's greed by public officials who have blinded themselves on purpose to the financial harm this causes, and the public health harm this causes. But it's driven by greed of the individual. Like, somehow, like, instead of watching sports for all the reasons we've loved sports for so long, now you're watching it because it's all about the money. Like, there's been countless anecdotes around the country where, like, you have people who aren't even sports fans. Okay, they could care less. They can't even name a player on a team, and they're wagering like tens of thousands of dollars on these sporting events because it's about the gambling. It's not about the game. And so it's appalling. And you have professional athletes right now who put themselves out there like as if they're good Christians, like Drew Brees, who talks about, being a good Christian as much as anybody out there. He's been promoting PointsBet, which is a gambling operator in our country. So, like, there's an incredible hypocrisy amongst people who, say they, are passionate believers in Christian values and so on, who are standing up and promoting predatory gambling. And in the big picture, the reason why this matters, if people say, well, gambling, this is harmless. When we talk about loving your neighbor like yourself, like the way Jesus loves us, right? This is the antithesis of that. This is a government program that's based on cheating and exploiting your neighbor. Okay, this is about loving yourself more than your neighbor. So this goes to the very heart of what it means to put love into the world. So whether you gamble, whether you're a sports fan or not, like, this is going to affect you and your community in a profound way. Yeah. And I actually want to add here, the end game, we're talking about sports gambling right now. The end game is not sports gambling. All these companies that are in Ohio right now, where they make their money, companies like DraftKings, they make 80% of their gambling profits from online casino gambling. Okay, so they couldn't, when they rammed this through Ohio, they couldn't get the whole enchilada all at once. They couldn't pass online casino gambling. So what the goal is sports gambling is certainly profitable to a point. Where the real money is online gambling, online casino gambling. To open up a slot machine parlor right in your kid's bedroom and in their dorm room, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So with the sports gambling apps, merely operate they get people to sign up, right? Here's $1,000 risk-free bet. They get you to sign up through the app. But the end game is then transition all of these people over to the online casino app once they get online casino gambling legalized in Ohio. So that's really what they want.
Right. So let's, I'm going to play the devil's advocate or the libertarian advocate here for a minute. So, who cares? Like, so what a guy is greedy. So what, somebody wants to gamble, everybody do it. This is America. Do what you want to do. What are some of the human costs to sports betting that you're seeing in other states, particularly to young people, right? Because again, hey, you gotta be 18 or 21. I don't know what's the 21 here. You gotta be 21 here in the state of Ohio to sports, bet and all that kind of thing. So we're not even talking about kids. So speak to that real quick.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand anyone who puts themselves out there as like a quote unquote true libertarian, like, they're with us 100% in this fight. Because what a real libertarian believes in is they believe in small government, right? Less government. what you have with this sports gambling effort in Ohio, and as well as your regional casinos and your lottery, like this is a government program. You and I can't run our own sports gambling operation. These guys get monopolies. They get licenses in your state in partnership with the state. There's no free enterprise here. This is no, economic engine. This is a monopolies get, the ultimate example of crony capitalism. They've lobbied for this, and now they essentially bought and paid both political parties in Ohio to ram this through. And so I think that's really important to understand. Like this is, if people want to gamble, if you want to be reckless with your money, sure, you can be reckless with your money, but you can do that privately. Like commercialize, people could already gamble. You and I could already place a sports bet with one another prior to Ohio doing this. It was already legal. What was illegal is you couldn't run sports gambling as a business. Okay. You couldn't run it for profit. But if you want to place a private wager with a friend or whatever, no one was stopping you from doing that. So I think that's an important distinction to make. And in terms of, the biggest demographic in Ohio that's going to pay the price for this is Ohio kids. Because as we touched on earlier, all these kids now, it normalizes predatory gambling for kids. Like you can't be a sports fan anymore without, betting on the games. And what the impact that has had is now you have kids, literally, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, walking into states like New Jersey. You have 18-year-old kids walking into Gamblers Anonymous meetings, okay, which was never happening before. Because this is like, totally, it's really marketed to kids. Like we love sports, like because all your peers are doing it. Like this is form of gambling, okay. And this isn't me saying this. This is the American Psychiatric Association saying this in what's called the DSM-5, which is known as the Mental Health Bible. It's what the health insurance companies use and every doctor uses to do healthcare billing around mental health. They've labeled gambling addiction as severe an addiction as cocaine, opioids, and heroin. Okay, that's the impact that gambling addiction has. That's the science behind this. And now you have a government program actively encouraging young people to do this. And so you're seeing kids across the country today getting addicted to gambling. That's why you're having an epidemic of child gambling across the country today because of this.
Les, this is such a point I want to dwell on here, because I think a lot of times, when folks hear an organization, for example, called Center for Christian Virtue, saying we oppose gambling and gambling expansion and things like the lottery and things like that, what they have in mind is the old moral majority and kind of pearl clutching Christians saying, oh, gambling is a sin, therefore we need to ban it, right? And I'll honestly, we can have a theological debate about this. I actually don't think there's necessarily something sinful about me and Mike betting on the Cubs and Guardians World Series together, right? That I would have won if we were working together at the time.
I don't bet, Pastor. I just want everybody to know I don't bet with these guys. Right?
But it's not that, right? Christians care about this issue because of what you walked through right there. One, you mentioned the impact on children. Can you talk a little bit about the impact on low-income Ohioans and the exploitative effect? And I almost want to kind of zoom out even from sports betting and talk about casinos and the lottery and all forms of state-sponsored gambling, and how just as a matter of public policy, these types of things are exploitative to low-income families, to low-income individuals, we should say, and ultimately costing taxpayers unbelievable amounts of money, just making it bad public policy, no matter whether you think placing a bet is sinful or not.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to touch. That's a kind of a two-part question. So I'm going to touch on the first part first. This idea of being sinful and Christian values, and somehow this is a moral thing. If you're someone who doesn't believe in God, like a lot of folks say, well, I don't believe in God, but I believe in love and all these other values. Well, for me, like God in its core is love, right? So this is a public policy that is the complete opposite of love. It's driven by greed. It's driven by exploiting your neighbor. Your success in predatory gambling only comes at someone else's expense. That's a complete opposite of love. Like the idea that we're all, the shared growth and so on, that we all have an opportunity to grow as people. So this is this is a business model that leaves millions of Ohio citizens as essentially as wasteful, as being wasted. Like they are relegated as expendable to society because 50% of the profits, whether it's the lottery, your regional casinos, or online gambling, comes from citizens who are addicted to this business. That's the business model. It's based on addiction. The casual player is irrelevant to the business model. And of those people who are addicted, it's disproportionately coming from low-income people. Okay, so for those of you who say, well, the lottery, we don't prey on low-income people, there's a reason why all the regional casinos and especially your lottery outlets, which are the biggest predatory gambling operator in the state, are congregated in low-income areas. Okay, they market these games as a chance to get fast money. So let's say you pay your rent at the end of the month, or you have a major healthcare expense, or you just lost your job. Like this is positioned to you as a chance to save your financial future, right? But it's a con, and I should have started with this. What makes this business different, the commercialized gambling business, different than any other business in Ohio, okay, including other vices like tobacco and alcohol, is it's a big con. All right, if you went out and order a slice of pizza, you order a Coke, you order a glass of wine, that's what you receive in return. Commercialized gambling is a financial exchange. Okay, that's what it is. It's a financial exchange, but it's a financial exchange that is mathematically stacked against you so that the longer you participate in it, the more frequently you participate in it, you end up losing all your money. Okay, it's a form of consumer financial fraud, just like price gouging and false advertising. So like if you're somebody, who talks about you have good values and you love other people, but you don't necessarily have a faith in God, like however that fits, like this goes against anything it means to be a good person. Okay, you can't build a good society when we're about ripping off our neighbor, when the public voice of American government is about ripping off your neighbor. It's a lie.
Yeah, that's a great point, Les, and something that I've been thinking about preparing for today, preparing for our conversation is that idea that this is a con, and we see gambling being couched in sort of this idea that it's somehow a civic good, whether that's through the lottery and it's going to benefit schools. Or I'm thinking of a story that we just saw come out of Cleveland with Bernie Kosar, the longtime Browns quarterback, and he was removed from the team's radio network because he placed a bet on the Browns-Steelers game and said that he was going to give the proceeds to charity. Like, if you gamble and then give it away, it's somehow okay. Well, he ended up losing that bet and he lost $19,000. Now, granted, Bernie Kosar can probably absorb that a lot better than other people can, but you're seeing these optics of, well, yeah, you put money into it, but this money can end up going to a good place, but it's creating all this devastation in its wake in reality. Yeah.
There's no, I like to say there's like, whether it's supposedly paying for education or for anything else, like there's no, that the finest education isn't worth it if it causes heartbreak and misery. Okay. And that's what this revenue source does. Like this is a business that's based on harming people. It's putting people into deeper financial problems. It's based on turning people, cultivating citizens into turning them into gambling addicts. Like I've literally met thousands of citizens in this country, including many from Ohio, who become addicted to gambling that's sponsored by the state. Okay, their lives have been turned upside down from this. The human suffering. If you haven't met a gambling addict, like honestly, there's no other addiction that even comes remotely close in terms of the human tragedy that gambling addiction causes. Because if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, that has an enormous amount of problems. But like with a gambling addict, you get all those problems that you have when you're a drug addict. But at the end of the day, you're completely broke. Like you've lied to people, you've lied to all your neighbors and family members and coworkers because you've stolen from them. Like you're literally at like the lowest point of any addiction. And that's why people who get addicted to gambling, 1 out of 5 of them attempt to commit suicide. And then half of them idealize committing suicide. So like there's no other addiction that comes close to this in terms of the human suffering that it causes. So just because the money's going someplace else, like how you make that money matters in terms of, just the fact you're giving it to charity, where that money comes from matters just as much as where you give it.
Yeah, how does it happen? So Les, like as you talk, I'm listening and I'm thinking, man, this sounds a lot like the whole marijuana fight, the commercializing marijuana here in the state of Ohio. And you started out with the medical, and then you expand the medical into full recreational. And then I'm watching how both sides, Democrats and Republicans, play that game. What are you seeing nationwide? Like, what is the playbook here? Who are the bad actors? We're talking about those who are making the bets, and we're talking about those who become addicted. But those aren't the only key players in this fight. I think people would be really surprised to know who are the key actors in getting these policies passed in the states.
Sure. Well, I think it's important, just a quick note on the marijuana lobbying campaigns you're seeing in Ohio and across the country. Like, they're using the playbook of the gambling industry. Like, the gambling industry has been doing this for the last 40 years in our country. And as they'll do whatever they can to crack the door open. So in your own state of Ohio, okay, when we just bring it back, 15 years now, on the people of Ohio for 4 times voted down casinos in your state. 4 times. Okay, they said no. But these powerful financial interests, these billionaire operators, in partnership with a handful of politicians from both parties who lust for more political power, they kept driving this forward. Okay, and they said, let's do it one more time. For the 5th time, they spent $50 million on paid media in Ohio, and they dragged it across the finish line to legalize regional casinos in your state, and they won by 2 points. Okay, when they spent $60 million on the 5th try. So, like, there's no movement for this. So the players are on this. It's some of the very wealthy individuals who are, most of them who are already billionaires, who are driven by greed, who want more money. Okay, on sports gambling, you have sports owners many of them who are billionaires, who want to, the market share of fans who follow professional sports. There's less and less people watching pro sports, so they're trying to generate more revenue, and so they're using sports gambling as a vehicle to increase their own profits. You have media companies who make money from the advertising that all these gambling companies run, whether it's ESPN, your local sports, your local news networks in Ohio, and so on. They're all going to make money now by this because they're going to make money from the commercials. And in some cases, some of your national media companies like CBS and so on, like they get a partnership. So if somebody from the CBS Sports website comes in, signs up for the Caesars gambling app through the CBS Sports website, like, there's a revenue sharing agreement there that CBS might get a cut of those losses from citizens when they go into Caesars. So, like, it's incredibly outrageous. And again, on top of that, then you have these partnerships with these politicians who lust for more power. So it's really kind of, we call it the gambling power. You have these very kind of elite institutions from both political parties pushing for this. And again, it's not being driven. No citizen in Ohio, at least very few, were pounding the table saying, I want an online casino in my bedroom. Like, no one's there's no grassroots movement for this. It's driven by these interests, and then they shape the public taste. By using the advertising, they're normalizing it to say, now, you want to be a sports fan, you could have money on the game. That's what it's all about.
I'll say too, this goes back to something we've been talking about for a while at CCV, which is the need to increase the threshold, our state constitution, to 60%. It's to that point, Les. I mean, we've used this story a number of times now of our constitution's just up for sale right now because it's such a low threshold. And there's industries like, whether it's the drug industry, whether it's gambling, the casinos, and others, that they know they can just. It's the ROI is worth it for them to just keep spending money to change our state constitution. And once it's in there, it's darn near impossible to get out.
Well, and just to give you an example from November, and this is the kind of money we're talking about here. The state, and it also shows how there's no grassroots movement for this. The people in California this last year in November, there was 2 referendums to try to pass sports gambling. They spent a total of $600 million to try to pass those referendums to get the people of California to vote for sports gambling. And the people of California voted almost like 70% no against these referendums. Despite those are the 2, the $600 million was the most ever spent on referendums in American history. Okay, so and they lost, and the gambling interest lost 70% by 70% of the vote. It's incredible. So that's a critical understanding this. Like, what people do privately is different. This is, if you have somebody who wants to change the direction of society, like this is your issue. Like this is America's most neglected major problem. It affects families. It affects businesses. If you're a small business that relies on discretionary income, like you're paying the price for all this. Like all this money that people are losing, that's money they're not spending at your business. So like it affects almost all aspects of society. And so this needs to be on your agenda if you're somebody who wants to make a difference in America.
And I just want to drive another point home for folks, because I remember it's probably, I don't know, 10 plus years ago, and it might have been something I heard from you, Les, that made this click. Because again, I think one of the things we want to do here with the narrative is help folks understand, this issue from a really practical standpoint. From a public policy perspective, the difference of, say, two friends betting dinner on a game, right? Or a bunch of friends all going in together and everyone putting $20 in for a fantasy football league, is that, and what we're talking about here is that you have a third party that is not taking any risk, that's making money on the transaction. That's and the government profiting off of that on top of it, right? That's, from a public policy standpoint, that's the difference between saying, hey, we're not supporting banning gambling altogether or banning people betting with each other or doing a fantasy football league. We're saying we're banning, we prohibit or we oppose predatory or exploitative gambling, where you have one party, the casino, the house, the sports betting book,
the lottery,
the lottery, that is not that's not absorbing really any of the risk. They're not putting any money up, right, of their own, and so therefore, this is what really stacks the odds against them. So even when somebody does hit, whether it's the lottery or hits a bet, they're still profiting majorly off it. They're never losing on the way they rig it, they con it to work. This is the public policy that we're saying is when a third party is profiting on, when you have the bookie, when you have the house, when you have the lottery company, when you have them making money on it, and they have all the incentive to exploit and pressure people, and they have none of the risk, that's the issue. And that's what for decades, centuries, really, in America, that's what we've said, hey, that is wrong. That's where exploitation happens. That's what happens low income. Is that right, Les?
But in a phrase, it's because it's a form, what you just described very eloquently is that's a form of financial fraud. It's a form of consumer financial fraud, like price gouging and false advertising, both of which are illegal. This form of financial fraud is still illegal unless you partner with the state. It's illegal for any of us to run a sports betting ring for profit. Okay, it's only legal when you partner with the state, and that's a critical distinction.
Well, Les, in our last few minutes here, I think we've pretty well covered the problem. I would hope that anybody who's listened to this point sees this as the serious issue that it is. Your organization is called Stop Predatory Gambling. So what are some solutions? What can we look forward to? How can we maybe start to turn the tide on this issue?
Sure. So we like to describe, we have 3 pillars of gambling reform. That's what we call them. The first pillar is to restrict gambling, advertising, and marketing in America today, just like we do for other dangerous and addictive products. So Purdue Pharma, many of you know, that's the company name that created all the opioids. Like they're not marketing on every billboard, at the stadium and everything else, like to get people to buy, to use opioids. Like they're not allowed to market that product that way. Okay. This is a dangerous and addictive product that's been identified by the science. We need to restrict the gambling and advertising like we do for other products similar to that. So that's priority 1, and especially to protect kids, right? We shouldn't be advertising in the middle of the day, gambling ads while kids are watching these sporting events, and they shouldn't be exposed to that. They're not exposed to Marlboro ads anymore like they used to be. We need to treat it the same way. The second pillar of gambling reform is to cut the amount of gambling losses that the American people and the people of Ohio are suffering to predatory gambling by 50% over the next 8 years. Okay. Collectively, as a people in America, we're going to lose more than $1 trillion of personal wealth to gambling over the next 8 years. All right. So the goal is cut that by 50%. In Ohio, those numbers, Ohio is at least like $2 to $3 billion a year that citizens are losing of personal wealth to commercialize gambling, like huge sums of money. Cut that by half, by 50%. And the way you do that is eliminating the most extreme forms of gambling, like online gambling, slot machines, the $20, $30 scratch tickets, the most high priced games. Eliminate those games. That's a big part of that reform. And then the third pillar is to stop the practice of gambling companies, including the lottery, of getting 50% of their gambling profits from citizens who become addicted to gambling. Okay. Like right now, all these companies, they're essentially exempt from like litigation. Like if you're a bartender and you overserve someone alcohol and someone gets harmed by that, like you can sue that bartender. These casino operators and these online gambling operators, like because the state's a partner, you cannot bring litigation against them. So we need to end the practice of the casino companies making half their profits from citizens who are addicted to this. And so one of it's holding them liable for this. And the other part of it is just slowing the games down. Like just, like all these games are meant to make you play as fast as possible. So like slow these games down, restrict the amount of wagering people can do. And that'll slow it down dramatically, the harm that's being caused.
Well, Les, we really appreciate your time and your insight and all that you and your organization are doing on this issue. And I know our audience is better for having heard all about this, and we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, the name of our organization is Stop Predatory Gambling. So appreciate the work you guys do, and thanks for the opportunity today.
This episode of The Narrative has been presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, go ahead and leave us a review or a rating, and please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. The Narrative is hosted by me, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan. Take care, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.